All right, welcome to everyone joining. We're going to start in about 5 minutes. And as is tradition with all of our Sunday events, if you want to leave where you're coming from in the chat, I'd like to see all the states being represented. And we'll start in about 5 minutes.
Everyone.
All right, we got Utah represented. Maryland, yeah, got the East Coast. Kansas, Oregon. Indiana. Pennsylvania, wow. And North Carolina. I think we might get every state.
We might just today.
Massachusetts, Illinois, map.
Oh.
Ohio, yeah.
Illinois represent.
Oh yeah, Chicago, right, Steve?
Mm-hmm.
I was in Chicago a month ago for a total of 18 hours with Chris. The fastest turnaround trip ever.
For optometry's meeting.
That's actually right before that for a
Oh,
Cooper
okay.
Vision event. Yeah. All right, welcome to everyone joining. We're going to start in a couple minutes, and if you want to head into the chat and let us know where you're coming from, that would be great, and we'll start soon. There we go. Got our Southern crowd representing Texas and Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee. Awesome. Colorful Colorado. I like that. Nice. Hey Perry, how's it going? And Eric is on, cool. All right, we'll start in just 30 seconds. So welcome to everyone funneling in. Join the chat box, leave where you're coming from, and we will start in just a few seconds. All right, great. I know people are still funneling in, but in respect of everyone's time, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a fantastic program today. We're doing part one of our On the Path Here predominantly private pay practice series. And Steve's going to be talking more about where are we now. Before we jump into that, we'll be doing a few introductions and a few sponsors as well. But before we even talk about that, I just want to address something real quick. I know that we put out a statement, what was it, about 3 days ago, and that wrote a really great one. Got a really great reply. And our whole ODsonFinance team, Dat, Julie, Chris, and myself, we just want to send a sincere thank you. There's been a ton of support that's been coming out for our kind of stand and solidarity on the topic of managed vision plans. And at this point, the statement, it's been shared a lot. It's been to pretty much every optometry media outlet out there. And we've gotten word that a few individuals might have misinterpreted it a little bit. And, we're not going to be running at managed vision care networks with pitchforks and torches. That's not the idea behind this. We realize that change is something that takes place over a long period of time. This is going to be an ongoing project. And we think we can achieve that change through positive discussion and education, like today's event with Steve talking. And we can raise awareness and understanding so we can all prosper together. And we want to do it both for our practices, but also for our patients as well. So thank you for joining us. A couple quick announcements before we jump in. First of all, if you haven't checked out ODsonFinance Careers, you definitely need to do it. We've got a couple hundred job listings on there right now. It's fantastic. It's the Indeed of optometry jobs. We've tried to make it simple. It's extremely affordable. Really, it's just to help the profession continue to thrive, help people find jobs, help private practice owners find individuals to work at their locations. So scan that QR code right there if you're interested. You can cycle through listings. If you are a candidate, everything is 100% free to you. So there's no reason you shouldn't even create a candidate profile. And student loan refi, we haven't talked about this in a little while, but we do have the lowest rates possible. We have the 0.25% AOA discount and the member bonus of $1,000. And that is going to expire at the end of August. So if you are in the market to refi your student loans, scan that QR code because all of those rates are going to change at the end of August. So lock those in while you can. And of course, this is a 4-part series. So remember to sign up for part 2. This is only going to make sense if you watch all 4 parts. So scan the QR code right there. I'm going to give everyone just a minute to do that. Just sign up for the next event because once again, this is a succession of events and it only makes sense if you watch all of them. Kind of like Star Wars. If you watch the first one, you kind of get left hanging on the other 2. So you got to watch. This time it's 4, it's not 3. And we're going to forget all the other ones were ever made. All right. And with that being said, I'm going to pass the torch over to Vision Source. Aaron Werner is going to talk about the business of optometry meeting in Texas and also the Vision Source Next program. So Aaron, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, other Aaron. Really excited that we get the opportunity to participate with great groups and colleagues just like you guys. Love what you're doing, love being a part of it personally for the practice and with Vision Source. So you've got my contact info up there. Please use it as you need to. But we do have a really unique business of optometry. That's our business curriculum at Vision Source event coming up. I'll talk about that in just a minute. Here's my cell phone as well. If you prefer to text or call me, you're able to hit on that. But leading up to that event in August, that course, we're very pro-independent, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Independent practices, not because you get to dictate your career, you get to provide the care to your patients that you feel is best for them, but it's also the best way to become financially independent. And if you look at these numbers, it's pretty obvious. There's a pretty big difference at the end of a 40-year career on what you have if you're an employee versus what you have if you're an owner. And then you have some equity in something to sell. You've got something that your name's behind. You built goodwill in the community. So we are fiercely independent and very pro private practice. But just owning a practice isn't enough. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We believe you've got to be not by yourself on an island, but part of a group. We're very proud of Vision Source and what Vision Source has done. There's lots of groups out, so I would encourage everyone to be part of something, be part of a group or multiple different groups. ODsonFinance is doing a great job. Vision Source does a great job, and there's lots and lots of overlap. If you look at this slide, and we call this our brag slide, if we took 2 practices 5 years ago, both at $1 million, and just what the different growths are, Vision Source growth, average growth, and the industry average growth, you can see at the end of the 5 years, there's a significant difference. And we believe that's because of the culture and the value that we bring, not just in cost of goods savings, but in being part of a community that helps us be better owners, better doctors, better business people, and provide better care. The next slide just shows what those growth percentages are that we were applying. If you want to go to the next one there, Aaron. And you can see that being part of a group doesn't keep you from getting hit from things like the pandemic. We all had a drop, but being part of a group and learning and taking knowledge from each other, sharing knowledge and best practices really helps us all recuperate faster and grow faster, because we're not by ourselves. We're part of something bigger. And of note, the Vision Source average practice size is just over 900,000. So it's we've got practices that are cold starts, we've got practices that are multi-million, multi-location, and we all get to learn from each other. The big question, next slide, is in practice ownership, is practice ownership right for you? Is it right for me? And it's not for everyone. We appreciate that, but some questions and things to consider if you are considering practice ownership. Obviously, we've talked about the higher compensation, that ownership premium, we like to call it, and you can read the rest. What I like is the fact that I get to control what the care we're providing to our patients. I get to have direct interaction with my team. I like feeling responsible for them and their families, and providing a safe and happy and valuable work experience for them, as well as patients, and certainly for myself. Some other questions on is practice ownership right for you? And next slide shows some characteristics that we've found work really well for a successful business owner. So if any of these characteristics really apply to you, we encourage you to think about owning a business, and maybe you're actively looking right now. Maybe it's something that's on your goal list. We've got some students on here. Maybe that's part of your 5 or 10-year plan. But these are what we've really found is that the characteristics of that successful business owner. And the next slide, just really hits on the things that we still need as business owners. Not only is it rewarding, but you continue learning and building your business acumen. And that's some things that ODsonFinance does really well. The discussions, I love following those because I benefit from them. The business optometry Vision Source really touches on the business sense and how to make sure you're profitable and successful in owning a practice. So we've got a couple different options for those who are looking to buy a practice, because we know there's a giant financial investment involved. On the next slide, Vision Source has what we call the Vision Source Fund, and there's 2 different programs if you want to click through twice on practice transitions, whether you're transitioning your practice to the next one, you're buying a practice, you're starting cold. What the Vision Source Fund is set up to do is invest in you, invest in the practice, so that you can achieve your dreams no matter what they are. And those 2 specific funds on the next slide, I'm going to hit them very high level. One is what we're calling the stimulus rebate program. The other one is capital funding. And depending on the size of the deal, the complexity of the deal, no 2 deals are ever the same. And so there's a discussion that happens to see which one of these 2 programs may be best for you and the situation you're in looking to buy a practice. But the reason Vision Source did this is because we want to make sure that we are continuing independent practice. We want the next generation to be as successful as prior generations. I happen to be a 5th generation optometrist, and I've benefited from prior generations, and we want to pay this forward. We also want to make sure that where possible, we keep those practices private and not see them go to private equity, and keeping the value high that the seller has earned. And so if we can invest some capital funding, then we're able to help a buyer buy that practice for valuations that they would see at private equity and still be able to keep it independent. So I'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in these. And what we've done is we've put together a program, and this is the one that Aaron talked about at the beginning. On August 19th to 20th, this is open to everybody, not just Vision Source vendors. The QR code right there will take you to the registration page. And this course we're calling Practice Ownership Through Acquisition. I bought 2 practices myself. Dr. Mick Kling is our practice transition advisor at Vision Source. He's bought multiple practices. So we pulled together a team with a lawyer, Dale Fishers with Bank of America, to not just talk about the warm fuzzy part of buying a practice, but what's really involved in it. What are the ins and outs? The next slide still has that QR code, so you can jump to it, but it talks a little bit more in detail about what we're going to hit on this during this event. Understanding your why, and then some of the nuances, submitting your letter of intent, making sure you do your due diligence. What are the legal documents and things to consider? What is a lender really looking for? How do the two Vision Source Next Fund programs, can they be involved? So we've put a very detailed program together, but also lots of time for Q&A and discussing. So it's limited to 40 attendees. So if you're interested in this, if you're looking to acquire a practice, your first, your second, your third, whatever it may be over the next couple months, a couple years, would welcome you. It's a free program to attend. You just have to cover your flight and hotel. And if you have any questions, I can give you all the details there. But we're really proud of what we're doing to help doctors and practice owners become more successful, become more financially independent, so they can continue taking care of their patients and their teams. So,
Awesome.
And Aaron and Dat, thank you guys for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Aaron. That was a fantastic presentation. And I know we've had Mick on for a few CE lectures. He is absolutely fantastic. So this is an event you don't want to miss. And I've got kind of a sneak peek of it, and it looks amazing. There's a lot of high level information that you can get from this. So scan that QR code. And Aaron, thanks again. I know you got to take the kids to soccer practice.
Yeah.
Appreciate you jumping on.
Of course. Yeah, thank you guys.
All right, and then let's jump on to our next sponsor, and that is Roya. And Mallory's going to be talking a little bit more about them. They're fantastic. I've actually used them for my second practice to start our website, and just a joy to work with. So Mallory, I'm going to let you take over.
Thank you so much. I am sharing my screen. Is the presentation up for everyone?
It is there. Yep.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. I'm the Director of Marketing at Roya, and we're proud to sponsor today's webinar series. Although we work with a variety of different practices ranging from single location cold start to multi-location, more enterprise type practices, and everything in between. The topic of private pay and breaking free from insurance companies is a trend that we have been supporting through our clients, and are excited to talk about some that we've worked with that have successfully made the switch and offer some tips and strategies. But before we talk about that, for anybody that doesn't know, who is Roya? Roya.com is a technology company. We support eye care professionals with our proprietary Canvas platform, which powers highly effective websites and digital marketing campaigns. We help eye care professionals create digital strategies that truly differentiate them from any other in the market and provide tools within the Canvas platform to track and manage campaigns efficiently. Our Canvas platform has many components. A big one is the CMS component, which powers our custom websites. But there are also many tools that range from a graphic design tool, telehealth, call tracking with artificial intelligence, review generation tools, and so much more, because Canvas is truly an all-inclusive platform. And it is professionally supported. So in addition to getting this technology platform with all of the tools that you need to successfully differentiate your practice, you also have the marketing support of a professional team that is all Google certified. We're a Google partner, and we help with improving online presence through Google Ads, PPC, SEO, social media, graphic design, content creation, everything. And I possibly can't go through all of those tools in just a couple moments. So I did want to mention Danny Estia, our Director of Business Development, is overseeing the chat. So she could be dropping in her calendar link or some examples throughout. So if you have any questions or want to learn more, you can book directly with her to get more information. But just to start off with, one simple tip for those looking to break free from insurance company and move to private pay, your website is a huge contributing factor. 94% of consumers base their first impression on your website, and it has a direct correlation to your new patient reach and profits. So if you can't capture somebody's attention within the first couple seconds, they're going to bounce to somebody else. And you've worked hard to improve your Google ranking and get that client's attention. So the last thing you want is to lose them based on something that you have full control over, like your website design or the speed at which it loads. I have here a before and after, and I use this example because this practice came to us in the late 2018. And at that time, they were looking to make the switch from insurance to private pay. And this is a mutual client with some others like Anagram. And you can see the one on the left, the before isn't the worst before we've ever seen, but it's a big transformation to the after on the right. You can see that the branding is much more prevalent in the after. Their logo wasn't even in the before. So key differentiators like that are things that are going to establish your experience and expertise. And especially if you're looking to focus on specialty services, you want to show your mastery and instill that confidence in consumers that you are the clear choice. I have a case study that's available on this practice that showcases improvements and achievements in both the short term and long term since making the switch to the Canvas platform, and happy to share this with everybody that would like a copy. And lastly, we're offering a no obligation consultation with a free comprehensive website and digital marketing audit, as anybody that is attending the webinar today and anybody that is an ODsonFinance member. Scan the QR code below to enter your domain to generate a comprehensive audit that'll be a 15+ page PDF that we will send to you. Just confirm the best contact information to send it to after entering your domain. Let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today, and good luck to everyone on your journey to switch and break free from insurance companies. We look forward to answering any questions, sharing more tips, or helping you directly to supercharge your strategy if you choose to use the Roya.com Canvas platform. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mallory. And once again, I'm going to put that QR code up there. Feel free to scan that. Roya is fantastic. And one thing that really stands out for me with my experience with them over the last month is just, if I need to change, I email them, and within like 10 minutes, they change things. It's fantastic. Other companies I've worked with have never been that responsive, so do appreciate them. So check them out if you're looking to build the next great website for your practice. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to get Steve on the floor in just a second. Today's event, just a few disclosures, is a non-CE event, and material is property of the speaker and not us. And all views and opinions are his and not ours. And so I'm going to give a quick introduction and pass the torch over to Steve. Steve Alexander has been in the eye care industry for all of his adult life and then some. He started as an optician at age 16 and has worked as an ophthalmic tech, lab tech, practice manager, regional manager, operations consultant, and has worn a bunch of other hats in both private and corporate eye care settings. Over the last 8 years, he has been consulting with practices to find ways to better understand their patients, the ecosystems in which they work, and how they create a practice of which they can be proud. For the last 2 years, Steve has been head of marketing and partnerships at Anagram, an industry-leading tech platform, driving change in eye care with the explicit focus of increasing price transparency, private pay business, and improving the lives of patients and the people who serve them. So Steve, we're excited to have you on and learn from you. So the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm gonna share my screen and make sure everyone can see it. Let's go there. All right, give me a quick thumbs up if you guys can see that presentation. Okay, excellent. It's full screen, hopefully. All right. Again, thank you for the introduction. I want to kind of get rolling with, be respectful of everybody's time, get rolling with the presentation. We can talk about kind of what's on the agenda today. So first, an introduction, then the thesis, where are we now, then identifying opportunities, prioritizing the change, and the most important step. I know it doesn't seem like there's a lot, but each of these things contains quite a bit, except maybe the introductions. So let's start there. My name is Steve Alexander. Like Aaron said, I'm head of marketing and partnerships at Anagram. I've been in eye care forever. I love this industry and I'm incredibly grateful to it for all of the various opportunities that I've had. Some of those opportunities are in just working with ODs and other ECPs and the passion that they have for helping their patients and for doing good. And I like to emphasize that when I can. A lot of the presentation is going to be focused on revenue generating activities and the detriment of the economy or other obstacles that practices face. But when we kind of approach things from a place of positivity, I think we can see more opportunities than if we're weighed down by the problems. So in a nutshell, been an optician forever, really love the industry, really passionate about helping practitioners do better financially so that they can do better for their patients. And I forgot about the gratitude. I forgot that slide was there. Thank you to ODsonFinance for putting this platform together. Thank you to Dat and Aaron, Chris and Julie for all the work that they did and the messaging. Thank you for the courage that it takes to get out and kind of plant a flag that a big group of practices wants to do something different. I think that is a tremendous and important, and I cannot overstate the value of that step. So I forgot the gratitude, but thank you, slide. You reminded me to do it. It's perfect. Okay, so now that we got that done, we're going to go on to where are we now? And if we start thinking about where we are, it's hard to think about it without thinking that the last few years have been pretty weird in a bunch of different ways, you know, and we don't have to get into the specifics of that, but tons of different changes, tons of necessary changes. Some things have happened that are totally beyond our control, and some things that we hopefully will have learned through the pandemic we'll be able to adapt and implement into our practices as we go forward. But despite the relative weirdness and a lot of the confusion that happened in the industry, there are some topics that tend to be talked about with pretty significant regularity, and the folks in the ODsonFinance group will recognize the things we're about to discuss as pretty common conversational topics. So we're going to run through these real quick. Things like private equity, vision plans, consolidation, vertical integration, et cetera, everything else on this list. We're probably going to focus more on the vision plan side of things, given the nature of this conversation. But I want to be clear that there are other things out in the industry, out in the space that you have to sort of contend with. And it would be, I would be remiss to not mention, to not call it out as something to recognize. Now, that's not the only place where the conversations sit. We also have a lot of trending topics around specialization and tech and marketing sometimes, occasionally. And I put it in those terms because of how I've seen a lot of ECP response to the idea of marketing. One of my favorite stories, and I may have told it in the past here, is I was talking to a doctor years ago and I asked him about what his overall marketing strategy was. And he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You know, Steve, I tried marketing once and it didn't work." And then he said nothing else. And it took every bit of willpower in my body to not laugh out loud at the sentiment that marketing doesn't work. Now, you know, there are better and worse ways to approach marketing, but marketing as a concept obviously works. It is every billboard that you see, every ad that you hear on the radio or on YouTube, the branding, all of the effort that goes into making, let's say, Coca-Cola recognizable or Sony, all of that stuff is marketing. So to say that it doesn't work is, I think, a mistake, but to figure out what about marketing actually works in the space in which we live, I think is really important. So these topics kind of lead me to the question, where does the conversation typically live right now. And I don't know if there's there's answers in the chat to this question, but in my mind, the conversation tends to live squarely on the left side of this slide. Now, I set these up in this particular way so we could have kind of exactly this conversation. It was my choice on where the bullets are, but typically the conversation lives on the left side, and we'll get into the reasons I believe that's the case a little bit later on. But I want to make sure to knock these out and make sure that we cover these topics, at least initially. I want to focus more on the right side of this slide. So in an effort to cover these topics, I'm going to hit them with a 2-minute drill. So direct impact private equity. Private equity groups are out in your communities buying practices and will often rebrand a formerly mom and pop shop to their own brand and then start more directly competing with you. They may lower their costs. They may increase their marketing spend. They may generate more awareness, and that can have a direct impact on your particular audience. Vision plans similarly own practices in your community or can own practices in your community. They own online retailers. They are often marketing to your practice, to your patients, excuse me, after you've pulled the authorization. So there's a direct competition between the vision plans and your business. E-commerce similarly markets to your customers, and other brick and mortar retailers also market to your business. That is a direct impact on your practice. All of these have. Round 2, an indirect impact. So with private equity going in the space, they're buying up practices. They may be consolidating supply chains, continuing to lower their costs. But also when those private equity groups get big enough, they are then going to be acquired by financial firms. As an example, one of the biggest private equity groups is now owned by Goldman Sachs, purchased a couple of years ago. If you take it to its logical conclusion, what is Goldman Sachs going to do with an eye care entity except sell it back to a bigger eye care entity for a significant profit? There's only really one way that ends, and that's going to be true for most private equity groups in the space. Vision plans, same thing. They are acquiring but incorporating them into their own supply chains. And that plays into consolidation and vertical integration and telehealth. All of these things have an indirect but significant impact on your business. Whew, I want to take a breath. I can't believe I did it. That was pretty good. I don't know why I gave myself that challenge, but I did. And I wanted to make sure that I covered the topics. Now, I understand that this is a big topic. Please, if you have thoughts about these things, or if you want more clarity, I'm happy to provide. Something that I want to leave this quote on, Dr. Viola Konevsky wrote an extremely useful Facebook post a couple of days ago, and I pulled this quote from it. I've been speaking with Dr. Konevsky. We've actually adapted that post into an article on Anagram's blog, and there will be a link to it at the conclusion of this presentation. But I'm going to take a drink, and I would like to open the floor for questions. I'm going to set a timer here again, 15 seconds. Chris, if there are questions, I'm happy to answer.
No questions yet, Steve. Take your water break and keep going through it, man.
Thank you very much. Okay. So that covers a bit about where we are. Next step is identifying opportunities. Now that we know something about what we're facing, what do we do? What can we do? How do we think about what our opportunities actually are? So going back to this, what can we do? We can reframe this. If we reframe this conversation, we think about the left side of the slide as things that are external or not within your control, and the right side of the slide as things that are internal or very much within your control. And neither of these definitions are perfect. Neither of the sides of the slide are exclusively external or exclusively internal. There are mitigating factors and accelerating factors that come into play. But if we construct this notion as things that are, primarily one or the other, we can start to think about the things we can influence. I want to call out the truth of our level of control often resides in our perception of it. So what we can actually control is probably a lot bigger than we instinctively think. And there are reasons why We put limits on our ability to influence things, our ability to make changes. And, if I were to put my philosopher hat on for a second, there is a tremendous amount of trepidation and maybe even fear in the eye care community of making significant change. And that fear comes from a lot of different places, and it's not at all unfounded, but it is also difficult to overcome. But a lot of practices I've spoken with and owners that I've spoken with are afraid of their direct competition, and they're afraid of the fact that while their top line might be growing, their bottom line isn't, or they're afraid of the overall economic sentiment, or they're afraid of not being able to find private pay patients, or they're afraid of their vendor partners, or they're afraid of their other colleagues, or they're somewhat afraid of their staff. And I want to highlight this one. A lot of things that practices want to do or say they want to do often fail in the execution, because it is very difficult to hold staff accountable when you can't let them leave. Right? If you need to make a change, your staff is not interested in making that change, then you're kind of stuck in the position of either insisting on the change and losing staff, or letting the change fall by the wayside. And more often than not, it's the latter. And we'd love to figure out a way to change that kind of thing. So I repositioned kind of this conversation into a bit of a concentric circle. So there are things that exist outside of your control, and there are things that exist within your control. As you guys are looking at this slide, I want you to think about the things internally that you're already working on. Now, nothing here should be new or surprising or anything out of the ordinary, and not, despite how much I want it to be, especially innovative, right? But a lot of the things that are in here, practices may be reading to say, well, I already have a specialty, or I already have all of the specialties, which is very common, or I have tech, or I do market, or I'm part of groups, or I do have best practices, or my staff is really happy, or whatever. But think about these things as things that we can be doing, and also recognize that these are the most influential things in creating a successful private pay business. If we stick on the external side of things, these things are going to exist, and there's nothing really that we can do about their existence. What we can do, what we can control, are the things that we do about them. So if we know that private equity is out in the space, Dr. Werner made a great case that there's an opportunity for you to sell your practice when the time is right, to take advantage of that. And there's that is actually a positive. A lot of practices struggle to find somebody to acquire their practice when they want to retire, or to bring on ownership, or what have you. So those things can be good. Vision plans, likewise, they can be good for the right circumstance. Practice opening cold could certainly use the benefit of having those vision plans that drive business through their doors, provided they select the right vision plans for the type of practice they want to create. E-commerce directly competes, consolidation directly competes, but those are things that you as a practitioner can take advantage of. There are technologies that exist in eye care right now that will help you compete with e-commerce, selling contact lenses, selling eyewear, selling nutraceuticals, whatever the case is. But all of these things, and the things that I haven't mentioned, all of these things take dedicated, concerted effort. And the difficulty that a lot of practices face as it relates to this dedicated, concerted effort is that their practices are so busy that they don't have time to work on their practices, because they're working in their practices. In Viola's article, which I will link to at the end of the presentation, she talks about how, everything's getting more expensive. Running a business is getting more expensive, and to see a patient for an hour of work without thinking of overhead like electricity or other utilities, or staff retention, vacation, so forth, her cost of doing business is about $140 an hour. And that is without those additional costs. That is just for the people that are there, for the rent, and that's it. And for the diagnostics. So if your cost of doing business is at least $140 an hour and the reimbursement for your eye exam is $40 from a vision plan, they're basically saying that you should be seeing 4 patients an hour to kind of break even. But as you're seeing 4 patients an hour, a couple of things happen by necessity. Your staff becomes either busier or more numerous, or both, where they're seeing more patients per hour, helping to support you in that. And you have to have more of them in order to facilitate that, both on the front end, seeing patients and making sure the timing feels good, but also on the back end, reconciling reimbursements and write-offs and making sure that what you billed is what you received, and making sure all of the orders were placed and delivered correctly, and all of the various boxes that you have to deal with, other labs that you have to deal with. So while all of these external obstacles, so to speak, have an influence on how your practice goes, you also have an influence on how much impact they have on your day-to-day. And a lot of it comes by focusing on controlling what you can control, which is how we get to the next little bit here. So no countdown here. There are so many different eye care specialties, and this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but a list of the ones that I see come up the most often. So to all the ODs in the audience, there are, hundreds of you live right now, and thousands who will potentially be watching this recording later on. You likely have a specialty that you've already somewhat incorporated into your practice. And I couch it as somewhat, because while a practice may have the capacity to do it, to specialize takes focus. It's not enough that the OD owner knows how to do myopia management. It's not enough that they know how to do dry eye or have the equipment with which to do dry eye or sports vision or any of the things listed here. It is a holistic opportunity. Your online presence has to go out and find patients or customers who need this thing in your community. Your website has to indicate that this is what you want, and you have to show that you have customers who are already doing it or patients that are already doing it. You need to have case studies. You need that social proof, and the social proof should exist on your social media. It should exist on your website. It should exist in your marketing. It should exist in your messaging. More than that, though, anytime a patient is calling your practice or emailing your practice through a form on your website or reaching out to you, your business in any way, they are telling you that they want to give you their business, and it is up to you to say yes to that. So a quick example from the vision plan side of things. When a practice is out of network with a vision plan, a phone call will typically sound something like, hey, I have such and such vision plan. Do you accept it? If on the other end of the call, the practice is out of network, the answer is usually no, and the phone call ends right then and there. Now, that patient who said, I have such and such vision plan, do you accept it? The question they're really asking is, I have a vision plan, can you help me use it? And the answer to that question ought to be yes. Certainly with the right software partners, it is yes. But even without having Anagram, you should be able to convey to the patient that you can help them take advantage of whatever vision plan they have. Similarly, if a patient is calling your practice to find out, what kind of services you offer, the cost of your services, or whatever the case is, it is incumbent on you as the practice owner to have trained the front desk to deliver a message that generates interest in your specialties. Now, not everybody needs ortho-K or myopia management or sports vision and so forth, but today, everyone can be talked about. Everyone can talk about dry eye. Dry eye is something that everyone deals with for the most part. We're sitting in front of screens for a minimum of 10 hours a day, and that is being light. And we certainly know that people aren't blinking the way that they should be. And if you can put numbers around that, if you can provide relief from that, because a lot of people, if they don't know it's a problem, they just think it's normal. And that's something that happens to a lot of folks. If children who don't know that their vision should be clearer are surprised when they need glasses and then surprised when the glasses help them. It doesn't change that much for adults. If they have dry eye, they just deal with it and assume that everyone deals with it. But if you can make the case, and certainly at the front desk, that dry eye isn't normal or it is something that can be fixed, and then you're the practice that does it, you become the hero. So I want to leave this slide with kind of that as a concept. Having a specialty or having the equipment to provide specialty services is the beginning. It is in no way getting it done. So, Field of Dreams famously said, if you build it, they will come. And that is true in a fantasy baseball movie only. So you have to build it, and then you have to get them to come to you. Once you have a bit of momentum, once you build your patient base and they tell others, and you can make a case and you can prove it out with social proof like we had talked about, it becomes easier. But that first bit of momentum building is extremely manual. And it is not just manual, again, for the OD owner, it is manual for the entire practice. So the front desk has to be aware that this is the business you want to build. Your techs have to be aware. Certainly your other ODs, your associate ODs, and your opticians. Everyone should be speaking the same voice to build that one specialty. Now, this is also cumulative. Once you build a specialty practice, any of these things, then the behavior becomes reliable, and that will continue to feed itself. And then you could potentially introduce another specialty. Now, if you're an OD and you want to have multiple specialties, that's great. If you're a practice and one OD wants to specialize in dry eye and the other OD wants to specialize in ortho-K, that's even better. Because one OD can keep you can keep that focused on each schedule. And as you add these business concepts, you recognize that these are private pay business concepts. Dry eye treatment is often out of pocket. Ortho-K is often out of pocket. All of these things are things that patients want, but cannot get through their vision plans. And another thing to remember, every dry eye patient, every ortho-K patient that comes through your doors is worth many multiples of a standard in-network vision plan patient. So while what I'm describing is a lot of effort, it takes time and concerted energy, and I'm going to emphasize this a couple of times, training and development, it is worth it. Maybe not immediately, but in the medium term, it is worth it. And in the long term, it will free your practice from the necessity of vision plans. I'm not saying that being successful with dry eye means you never take vision plans again, but it makes taking those vision plans a maybe instead of a must-have. And that puts the power back into your control. All right, next up. What else can we control? Now, Roya did a wonderful presentation earlier about the website, but there's tons of tech and a lot of different tools that we can control to influence the way that our practice goes. A lot of practices I've spoken with are a bit reticent to embrace tech, or embrace tech fully or fully incorporate tech in the way that it is part of their business. And a lot of it goes back to what we talked about in the previous slide, is in the execution. Most software and even hardware, oh, not most, software and hardware on their own will just sit there. Right? If you have a piece of tech, it's not going to do anything for you unless you make it do something. So having the best retinal imaging tech in the world doesn't matter if you can't get your patients to want it. Having the best dry eye stuff in your office, or having a fully equipped dry eye practice doesn't matter if your patients aren't interested in it. LipiFlow, as an example, is many $1,000s of machine investment, but if you can't get a patient to say yes to the treatment, then you will have wasted that money and that time and all of the effort to get it in. And I don't mean to pick on LipiFlow. It's a great machine, and I know practices that have had really great success with it. But think about things like that. If you're investing in something, it is then up to you to make it successful. And I think part of why it's unsuccessful is that it can be unsuccessful, is that we as practitioners or we as practice owners don't do a great job of communicating what we do and what we're passionate about. I'm going to pause for a drink real quick, and then I'll dig in a little bit. What I mean by that is most ODs that I've spoken with have something that they want to do and they want their patients to do. And a lot of times they do set it up that way. As an example, a practice's exam. Practice's exam fees are usually dependent, talking about usual and customary, they're usually dependent on what the practice offers as part of the eye exam. So if it's a standard exam plus visual field, maybe retinal photos or optos or whatever the case is, the standard fee is predicated on that. Most opticals have preferred lenses or preferred combinations of products with materials and coatings and so forth that sort of presupposes what the patient should be getting. Now that doesn't tend to exist on the specialty side of things, and it doesn't tend to exist in the communication that we provide to our patients and our prospective patients. Earlier, when Mallory was talking about Roya, she had mentioned that there's a CMS as part of it, a content management system. Now, a lot of the website providers in the space use the same blogs on every website. And those blogs are, moderately informative, but the kind of content that patients are often looking for are specific to needs as opposed to general health stuff. Most patients aren't expecting general health stuff from their eye doctor. They're expecting eye health stuff from their eye doctor. And in my experience, a lot of the OD websites that I've looked at, they don't really do a good job of talking about the eye health stuff that the OD owner or the practice owners are most interested in delivering. We don't do a great job of setting our standard of care, and I put a lot of that on the vision plans. If a practice is 80% vision plans, then whatever the OD wants their standard of care to be doesn't apply 80% of the time. And that's a difficult thing to face. It's difficult to do the math where like, well, I want to do A, B, and C, but the vision plan says I got to do X, Y, Z, and I'm doing X, Y, Z 80% of the time. So the communication we give to our patients, to our prospective patients, is usually reflective of the 80% of the time that we're currently doing, as opposed to the 20% of the time that we want to be doing. And we don't put in the effort to grow that 20%. That's why the focus on communication tech, on customer acquisition, on website stuff. There's so much you can do on your website now that we couldn't do 5 or 10 years ago in a way that provides the kind of convenience that today's patient and customer wants. So as a personal anecdote, when I go on a website and my options are to call or to email or to chat, my preference is to chat because I'm on the website right now. And the odds are somebody who works for that company is there right now too and can talk to me and knows the page that I'm looking at and can likely answer some of the questions that I might have and speed the process for me. Calling on the phone, leaving a phone number. Now, this is me. I want to preface this with I'm an elder millennial, so I'm whiny and entitled and so forth. But when the idea of calling somebody on the phone, having to go through a mechanical prompt, potentially leaving a voicemail to get a phone call later on, which, by the way, if somebody calls me from a phone number that I don't recognize, I will never answer it because it's a robocall most likely. And also, I don't check voicemails because it's not 1997. So, all of these things are older moves that kind of don't appeal to the kind of patient that I think most practices want on this side. So things like live chat, things like being able to have direct emails. There are lots of different ways for you to get your patients and potential patients to engage with you. And many of them are digital. And I know despite the existence of a lot of these tools, a lot of us don't lean all the way in because these types of things are difficult and take effort and a lot of work to change. Next up is finding your private pay people. I've talked about this a bit, but this takes work. Everything we're talking about here takes work. And as you know, I want to make sure I hit the nail on the head here. Vision plans make a lot of this easier. Meaning, if I'm in network with a given vision plan with a significant network in my community, they do a lot of this for me. They market for me. A practice's name is listed on a vision plan's website, and the patient can find you that way. So, you know, it's easier to get patients by being in network with a vision plan. The question that we have to answer is it better? And it's a difficult question. It is extremely context specific. It being better is largely dependent on whether or not you can make that vision plan, each individual vision plan, successful for your practice. And what I mean by successful is it takes full analysis. It has to be profitable. It has to be timely. It has to be easy to work with, and they have to actually drive patients through your doors. Something that I will always say is that if you're in network with a vision plan and they're driving a really small number of patients through your door, and what a small number is obviously relevant to your individual practice, but let's say 5, there's a vision plan that's sending fewer than 5 patients through your doors every month, you are better off getting rid of them because they're not driving enough business to you to warrant all of the extra work that they ask for. And because it's so uncommon, all of the extra work is even more difficult because your staff isn't accustomed to doing that work and isn't accustomed to the various nuances of that vision plan. So all of that preamble to say, you have to go out and find your private pay people. So that includes marketing and importantly, not advertising. Advertising and marketing aren't the same thing. Advertising is part of marketing, but it is not marketing. Marketing is everything that is outward facing. It is your community engagement. It is your social media. It is, if you have a partner, it is what they go out and say about you, for you in your community. It's your website, it's your reputation. It's also, you know, if you live in the community in which you practice, it's your engagement with the rest of the community. There are, you know, local commerce societies and the Rotary clubs and different meetings you can participate in. Now, again, all of this takes work, all of this takes time, and you cannot do everything all at once. This is why when I suggested specializing, I suggested one specialty and then carving it out and building it as a behavior, because it's easier to add behaviors on top of behaviors. It's very difficult to make a bunch of individual changes and make those changes stick. I was reading a book about habit, and a really great sort of mindset for adding habits is to tie it to an existing habit. So if you want to start flossing and you're not flossing, add it to brushing your teeth. So like after an established habit, I'm going to do this new habit. And then that trigger of established habit will build that new habit. There are a bunch of these different ways of thinking about stuff to add things on. Then there's incorporating well-established business practices. And I know I can hear the collective groan on the audience. They're like, well, I do business practices. I'm like, sure, you probably do a fair amount of them. But in my years of consulting and talking with practices, I know that staffing is an opportunity and has been an opportunity for a long time. The Great Resignation is new and different, and it's a variable in that, but there have always been staffing issues. There have always been problems with retaining and developing staff. There's always been problems with delivering quality education to your staff. Now, there are partners that you can work with on every bit of what we're describing, and I'm personally a believer in letting the experts be the experts. But with staff stuff, especially with ODsonFinance's new platform, you've got the opportunity at this low rate to always be recruiting. And I say this knowing that recruiting is also difficult and time consuming, but you will never know when the right person is looking for a job in your neck of the woods. And you will never find them if you're only recruiting when you're in desperate need of a new hire. Also, if you're only recruiting when you're in desperate need of a new hire, you will hire the first person that seems reasonable, and that is not a good move. Mostly, like sometimes it'll work out and sometimes it won't. And you will remember those times that it won't way more acutely than the times when it worked well. So think about always recruiting, and think about your staff as a front-facing, a customer-facing element of your business. You may give the best exam on the planet, the tightest refractions, you may have the best bedside manner, your patients may absolutely love you. But if at any point in your office that changes, if the front desk doesn't give the patient a great experience, if your optician sells too hard or undersells or doesn't deliver in one form or another, it doesn't matter how great your exam was, that patient's opinion of your practice will be lowered. And they may never tell you about it. They may just go elsewhere. So I cannot overstate the value of your staff. One last bit in this section, you're independent. You're not alone. And I want to make sure that that resonates. I think in this group, it should resonate more acutely than in others. There are growing groups of eye care practitioners doing good and doing well. This is another opportunity for me to be grateful for ODsonFinance. You are doing good and doing well, and I appreciate it. And I hope every participating OD here appreciates it. Don't be afraid to ask for help from colleagues, from mentors, from consultants and advisors, from your vendors. If you're confused about what frames you should be carrying, talk to your vendor. Now, I know a lot of ODs might bristle at that concept because they've been subject to padded orders or poor customer service or what have you. And certainly that happens. I'm not saying partner with every vendor, but if you got a relationship that you can rely on, if you have a partner that you can trust, take their advice. If you're going into this relationship for the long haul, it is in their best interest for you to be successful, and they will give you the advice that will help you be successful so that they can be successful. Even if they're doing it for selfish reasons, their motivation is for you to do better every time. Okay, another questions and hydration slide.
We got some questions now, Steve. So you discuss communication seems to be a big theme, and you discussed the example of a patient calling your office, and how do you convey to those patients calling your office that you can help them utilize their vision plan, even if you're out of network? Like, how do you build that script, and how do you know what to say?
Absolutely. So if it's strictly that out of network question, it depends on the tools you have available to you. So if you have Anagram, the question is going to be a little bit, or the answer is going to be a little bit different than if you don't. But if you don't, you have the conversation to say, we are going to work with you to make sure you get the quality of care that we believe our patients deserve. Our costs are X, Y, and Z. Our eye exam is this. Our materials go from this range to that range. And we will make sure that and the product selection we give to our patients who are an out-of-network basis are extremely high quality and at a fair price. So your upfront cost will be lower than it would be on an in-network basis at other places. And we will make sure you have an itemized receipt and you have the form at your disposal to fill out and send to your vision plan, and we'll let you know where to send it. Now, in that conversation, it is largely dependent on the confidence of the person answering those questions and practice and development and all of that. And it is harder to win that conversation when you're asking the patient to do some legwork. If, on the other hand, you have access, Anagram access, the conversation is, if you just give me a few pieces of information, your first name, last name, date of birth, last four of your social, I can let you know what your benefits are here. And we can file those claims as an open access provider for you. And that is a good deal simpler, and it takes a lot of the onus off of the patient. And it makes it so that not only will I help you use your benefits on an open access basis, but I will actually do it for you. So you will receive the check from your vision plan a couple weeks after you buy your glasses from us.
Gotcha. Awesome. So more along the line of communication and marketing and all this awesome stuff that you're talking about, it can seem daunting to a practice owner who already has to wear so many hats. So some of the questions here are, what resources do you recommend for marketing and learning how to effectively communicate?
There are tons of places you can go, but I think a lot of what you want to look at is who you're partnering with right now. I think you cannot expect as an optometrist and practice owner to also be a marketing expert. You are not going to become a marketing expert overnight, and it is probably not a good place to aim either. What I would suggest is understand who you are as a practitioner and understand what you want to be as a practice. If you want to be the best dry eye practice in your community, or the most well-known dry eye practice in your community, that is a great place to begin to then talk to a marketing organization to build that with you. There are a bunch of different marketing groups in eye care, some of which specialize in the medical side of things, some of which specialize in SEO, search engine optimization to get you listed, and some of which specialize in building out campaigns based on what you want to do. But I think the difficult thing that a lot of practices face with marketing is that there's so much competition in the space. If you're in any kind of metro area, you've got dozens of other practices to compete with. But mostly those practices are competing for the generalist patient. They say their websites and their social media say the same kind of stuff. We provide excellent eye exams. We provide high quality eyewear. We treat your family like family, that kind of stuff. Most of them don't specialize and don't explicitly call out computer vision syndrome or dry eye, or they don't say sports vision or specialty contacts or myopia control. Or if they do so buried in pages after pages after pages. It's not front and center. So I think if I were to give kind of general marketing advice to the audience here, it is think about the practice you want to have and think about the baseline communication that you need to share to get started. Momentum is a really important thing. Inertia is a really important thing. But once you start moving into a direction and the momentum gathers, it becomes easier. A quick aside for like the communication piece, when I'm talking to practices about potentially dropping a vision plan, I suggest that they do so from the bottom up. And some of you have heard me say this before. When I say bottom up, I mean the lowest patient population to the highest. The reason I suggest that is if you drop a vision plan at the bottom of that spectrum and early on your staff is not equipped to convert those phone calls into customers, the negative impact you can have is limited by having dropped the smallest volume plan. As your staff has those conversations more, as they get more comfortable in having the conversations, and as they start to see it be successful, they're able to deliver that conversation more effectively and more quickly and get buy-in sooner, because they'll start to assume that it'll work instead of assuming that it won't. And that latter bit, assuming that it won't work, is a huge problem. If you offer it to your first 6 patients and they all say no, front desk people will get dejected and they will stop without support, without coaching, without development. So getting better at having the conversation is vital to having the conversation become successful. When it becomes a behavior, it's easier. When it becomes presumptive, yes, it is way easier. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer to say, like, uncover what it is you want to accomplish, set a specific goal, not a generalist kind of goal, because generalist marketing takes millions of dollars. But specific marketing is both less expensive and more effective, provided you know what you want to achieve.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
A pleasure. Okay, one more sip of water and we'll move on. Okay, how do we prioritize the change? This is kind of been the theme kind of lurking in the back of the conversation. And I've said change a ton. I think I've hopefully been clear that change isn't easy. And we know it's not easy, but it is vital. If I could leave kind of this slide with one thought, whether you are ready or not, change is coming. Change has already come. You know, earlier we talked about these last few years being kind of weird. That's part of it. Is there was a huge change that happened that most of us didn't have an option. We had to change what we were doing in order to stay open. And hopefully we learned a ton in that process. One of the things I hope we learned was that seeing fewer patients in the same time frame actually increased revenue and actually increased both patient and staff satisfaction. But that aside, the industry is changing, and the rate at which it's changing is accelerating. Staying still or trying to react to the changes is a recipe for disaster. So we want to talk about proactive change, and we want to talk about it in the context of time. So, something that Laura Vanderkam is a speaker and writer that I really like, and she had mentioned, there's this quote which I really like and admire and kind of aspire to, but she also suggests that saying I don't have time is usually not an accurate description of what's happening. When most people are saying I don't have time, what they actually mean is it's not a priority. So if you don't have time to think about your marketing or develop a specialty or like actually focus on the specialty, you may in fact not have time. I don't mean to judge, but it is more likely that it is not a priority, or you prioritize other things instead of that. So if the people listening understand that they want to build a specialty or have tried to build a specialty, but ended up going back to just seeing patients as they come because that's what your appointment book looks like, it is a result of not prioritizing the specialty. Because your book looks empty, you would rather see it full, or because your staff sees the book as empty and they would rather see it full because of how they've been trained or what their incentives have been to date. So I want to think about this in terms of prioritization as opposed to being too busy. And if you are in fact too busy to make these changes to your practice, there's a real and honest conversation that you ought to have with yourself. And it is, if I'm so busy, if I'm seeing too many patients to work on my business, is that an effective or sustainable way to grow my business over time? And the answer to that question is likely no. Usually a practice that is booked out well in advance is booked out with vision plan patients, and often low reimbursing vision plan patients, and it comes with a cost. We'll get into the specifics of those in future sessions, but this is kind of a broad overview of some of these concepts. I want to ask for any questions if there are any about that. I know that was a briefer section, but by design.
Steve, there is a question. So can we submit and accept the reimbursement and subtract from the patient's bill at the time of service? Curious if the plans will allow that.
VSP allows that. It's called assignment of benefit. There's a good reason to do it, and there's a good reason to not. Kind of getting into the specifics a bit. If a practice is fully out of network with every vision plan, adding that to your process increases admin, increases the cost of doing that transaction, and it only simplifies the process at the time of purchase. But if you know that the patient is going to get the reimbursement in a couple of weeks, and you communicate that clearly to the patient and set those expectations appropriately, it is not a barrier to making the out-of-network side of it successful. Most patients are familiar with like a rebate that comes to you. You can think of it that way. Most patients have had reimbursements from their insurance companies in the past, but usually when they get something from their insurance company, it's a bill or something that they have to pay. So this can be a nice change of pace. And if you position it that way, it can feel pretty good for the patient. But in answer to the thrust of the question, yes, there is a vision plan that allows that, but it's only the one. And it is only, I think, nominally better than having the patient receive the reimbursement later.
Gotcha. Thanks.
My pleasure. Okay, next up is the most important step. If we take as granted that recognizing that change is necessary is step one, what is the most important step then? Now, this one is a quote from one of my favorite books. Bonus points, if anyone knows what book this is, shout out to me. I'll have my contact information. You can email me or text me or whatever. But if you've ever spoken with me, you know that I'm a gigantic nerd, and these are gigantic. This comes from gigantic nerd books. But really important for me is it's the first step is not the most important. It is an important step, but the next step is the most important one. It's always the most important one because it's always the one that you have to take in order to be successful. If you take just the first step, or if you stop taking the next step, you stop progressing. Fairly simple. So what are the next steps? The next steps are session 2. Where are we headed? I added a link here for you guys to register. If you click to register, it should take you to the registration link, but I'm sure Dat and Aaron and company will send everything out as needed. Ahead of our next session, I want you guys to think about your practice in a couple of different ways. Think about the changes that you've wanted to make for a while, and do they still make sense? And this is assuming changes that you've not yet made. Do they still make sense? If so, let's build an action plan, and we'll get into what that actually looks like in the next session. And if not, let's evaluate what changes do make the most sense and build an action plan around those. So things you wanted to do 3 or 4 years ago may not make sense anymore, and they may still, but they may not be the right thing to do next. So we want to think about that. And then don't forget to analyze and act on the things you instinctively know about your practice. I mentioned this a bit earlier on. If that vision plan that brings in a few patients a month worth it, I'm going to say no, but I don't know your individual practice, and that's something for you guys to think about. And then think about if you're happy seeing the number of patients per hour that your practice is seeing. And happy, I suppose, is up for a lot of interpretation, but are you satisfied with it? Is it right for your practice? Is it right for the staff that you have? Is it right for your patients? And is it right for your long-term health? So think about all of these things, and I think the presentation and video will be made available between now and the next session. But think about these things and be ready to talk about them. Next session, I will hopefully be sort of interactive along these same lines, but I would love to hear specific things that you want to do, and I'll try to incorporate them in the presentation as we go. Here's contact info for me. It's got my email, it's got my office line, it'll ring on my cell phone. Also some additional resources. There are links to a psychology paper by Amanda O'Brien about internal and external control. There's that TED talk by Laura Vanderkam, who I mentioned about free time, and a link to Anagram's blog, Spyglass, by Dr. Konevsky for you guys to review. Okay. I think I did it.
Awesome.
Steve,
That was a fantastic first session.
One more question here, Steve. How
Yes,
do
sir.
you suggest dealing with a poor Google social media review?
Oh, so this is such a huge opportunity, obviously, depending on what is said in the review. These are those kinds of things that can act as social proof. The internet is replete with stories of Karens for easy understanding, for like customers or people who overreact to things or are overly entitled or whatever the case is. And a lot of people reading those reviews are extremely ready to side with the business if the business makes the right response. So depending on what the review is, like if the review says, 1 star and the optician punched me in the face, and if it's true, there's very little you can do about that. Like maybe don't have that employee there anymore. If the review is more reflective of a bad day or a misinterpretation on from the patient's side or what have you, those are things that you can think about and respond to, and start with, if in any case, when I was working in practices and somebody would come to me to complain or to ask for something to be done, I would begin and end those conversations with gratitude. It is really important that you thank the patient for taking the time to call your attention to whatever happened, and then respond as positively as you can, saying, thank you for writing this. Really sorry this was how it went down. I would love to help resolve this situation, and let's do A, B, and C. Again, thank you. We look forward to making this right, or however you want to couch it. But it's important that you take the high road, and it's important that you acknowledge that you're not perfect as a business. Nobody is. And, I will say, as a as a millennial, I look for like 5-star reviews, fully 5-star reviews, I find suspicious, but like 4.7 stars, 4.8 stars, that feels more real. And I tend to read the 2-star reviews and the 3-star reviews, because those feel like, anyone can give a 1-star review and be throwing a bit of a tantrum. Anyone putting in like a 2, 3, or 4-star reviews has at least thought about it. And that's what I like to look at. The 5-star reviews are similarly excessively effusive often, but I always look for the 2 and 3 and 4-star reviews, because those are often the ones that responded to by the practice, and I like to see how the practice engages, or how a business engages. There's a bit of a long-winded answer, but definitely respond with gratitude and kindness, and with the intent to address the issue.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot for that. You have people hanging on the edge of their seats for the next 3 parts of this too. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. That was fantastic. And make sure to register for part 2, because once again, it's a continuation. So you want to get all 4 parts in, and mark it on your calendar as well to make sure that you're attending. It's another Sunday morning next month. And I want to send a special thank you over to Steve for preparing a fantastic lecture that kept everyone engaged. Also want to thank Vision Source, Aaron Werner. If you are interested, definitely scan the QR code for Vision Source. That is a free event happening in Texas. You just pay your airfare, but it's going to be a fantastic program. And I want to thank Roya as well. So contact Danny if you have any questions or any interest in that, but they are a fantastic resource for developing both your website and your marketing. And with that being said, let's go ahead and we will do the raffle here. Oh, sign up for Steve's event. There is the QR code right there if you need it. And our raffle winner is Michelle Kwan. So Michelle Kwan, if you are in the audience, you have won a $100 Amazon gift card. So feel free to email us, admin@ODsonFinance.com, to claim that. Once again, I'm going to put this slide up here so you can scan that QR code and register for part 2. Any final words, Steve, before we sign off?
Really excited. I'm super pleased to be able to do this. I think the conversation around successful private pay practice is long overdue, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. I'm looking forward to the conversations that come out of this. If I could, everyone in the audience, if you have questions for me about kind of what I'm thinking here, please feel free to reach out. You've got my office line and you've got my email. You can actually text that office line and it'll come through to me. I look forward to session 2. I look forward to kind of what everyone does having heard this, but such a pleasure. And thank you to ODsonFinance for putting this together.
Awesome. All right. So once again, reach out to Steve, and then we will see everyone next month for part 2. And as always, if you want to talk about something, jump on the ODsonFinance group. Steve's on there. We're all on there, so we can all contribute. All right. Well, everyone have a great rest of your Sunday, and wishing you a prosperous next week. We'll see everyone soon.